Promise me you'll never touch the floor." John Miller's voice was papery and thin the night the storm rolled across the prairie in 1975. Lightning forked in the window of the farmhouse, showing the old man's knuckles like roots under skin. The living room smelled of pine wax and wood smoke, of rain pressed down into the earth. His son, Thomas, stood frozen by the mantel, hat crumpled in both hands, while the old farmer tapped the floorboards with a cane and repeated it with a stubborn flame in his eyes. 50 years, Tom. Not a nail lifted. Not a board pried up. Not a scrape. Why, Pa? Because a man's life is longer than he thinks and shorter than he knows. Promise. Outside, the wind rattled the corn like paper prayers. Thomas swallowed. He was a practical man who understood tractors, not riddles. But John Miller had raised him with calloused patience and a clockmaker's sense for timing. When to plant, when to hold, when to wait, while the sky argued with itself. Thomas bent, kissed his father's brow, and said what all sons say on nights when thunder is loud and fear is louder. "I promise." They hammered the deal into the air with silence. John's eyes softened. The storm kept going, and the floor, those ordinary planks of old-growth oak laid by John's father before the war, seemed to listen. Years passed. The house learned new sounds. Babies crying, radios humming, coffee percolating, laughter threaded through hard seasons. But no one touched the floor. When a board squeaked, Thomas told his wife to lay a rug. When the varnish dulled, he dusted and left the age to glow on its own. People joked about superstition. Thomas shrugged. "Honor is also a structure," he'd say. "It holds you up." John died before dawn that autumn. A soft breath, a small turning of a page. In his pocket they found a folded scrap with a date and 2 words. "Hold fast." 50 years is a long bridge to walk, and it was built one day at a time. Crops rose and failed and rose again. Bills piled like snowdrifts. Rain came late. Winter came early. Tractors broke. Calves got sick. Hailstones hit like thrown gravel. Then Thomas's boy, Michael Miller, grew tall and restless, left for a while, and came back when his father's hands started to shake. By 2025, the living room floor had become a legend in the family, an inside joke, a quiet altar. Michael would cross it every morning with a mug of black coffee and a weight in his chest, and his boots would catch that faint hollow echo near the center of the room, the one spot that sounded like breath beneath wood. It wasn't a ghostly sound. It was practical, almost polite, as if the floor was clearing its throat. 50 years, Thomas would say, tapping the calendar every January. A vow is a fence. Cross it and you don't just break rules. You lose land inside yourself. April brought a different kind of thunder. A letter with a polished logo. Hail development and energy. A survey map with angles like teeth. A final notice. The bank seal looked colder than any frost that had ever touched those fields. Victor Hale, a man who wore his smile like a sharpened cufflink, wanted the Miller acreage for a pipeline spur and a luxury lodge. He wanted the view the Millers had paid for with their backs. He wanted the wind and the soil, and he was good at getting what he wanted. He had lawyers like well-trained dogs. 3 months, the letter said, or we foreclose. Michael stared at the floor till his eyes watered. He didn't know yet that his grandfather had measured time in a different currency. He only knew the house had its own breathing, and that the one place you never touched was starting to sound like a heartbeat under his feet. Introduction with CTA, Meet the Millers, 700 words. If you're new here, you're about to step into a story about patience measured in decades, a riddle that slept under wood, and a promise that refused to die. This isn't just a mystery in a field or a twist in a farmhouse. It's about the kind of loyalty that makes a man hold a line long after his muscles quit. And if you love stories where a detail seems strange, too small to matter, then turns a life on its hinge, you're in the right place. Michael Miller wakes before the horizon remembers its blue. He feeds the heifers, checks the fences, rinses the dust off his tongue with coffee that tastes like charcoal and resolve. He counts bills. He counts breaths. He counts the weeks until Hale's deadline. His father, Thomas, sits at the kitchen table with a blanket over his knees and the quiet pride of someone who has never broken his word. The farmhouse is worn honest. Plaster cracks like river maps. A sink that whistles. Windows that get a milky sheen after every rain. The living room holds family portraits, sepia and sun-faded, of men and women who stood straight when the wind bent them. Everyone in the county knows the Millers. They're the people who bring casserole to funerals and never make you feel poor when they hand it over. They show up for school auctions with tools and jokes. They bail neighbors out of mud with tractors named like old friends, but kindness doesn't keep ledgers from turning red. The last 2 seasons kicked like mules, drought, then flood, and Hale's people have been circling with drones and clipboards, measuring, calculating, valuing the place in numbers that ignore memory. Michael tried the bank. He tried a partner. He tried selling a north pasture he swore he'd never sell. The figures sit stubborn. The only thing more unyielding than the math is that floor. Those boards his grandfather guarded with his last breath. There's a nail head near the center that glints weird at dusk. A hairline seam that catches dust like an eyelash. When the heater kicks on at night, you can hear, if you stand very still, a soft answering hum from underneath. A hollow, but not empty. Like a room behind a door you haven't noticed. Before we go deeper, before the first board groans and the first secret breathes fresh air, do me a favor. If stories like this stir you, if you live for that moment when the impossible turns out to be a plan, subscribe to the channel. It tells the algorithm, our century's fussy gatekeeper, that you want more of this. American folklore stitched to real lives. The smell of cut hay and court papers. The taste of iron and rain. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when a promise hits its 50th year and asks to be answered. The strange event. The floor that waited. 1,300 words. The first real sign comes with the last frost. Michael is mopping when the mop head snags on that hairline seam near the center of the room. The wood is warmer there. He puts his palm flat. The heat is faint, like a held breath. He fetches a flashlight and lies belly down, cheek to the boards, ear to the grain. He hears something. Not a creature, not pipes, a stillness shaped like expectation. "Dad?" Michael calls. "Did Grandpa ever say anything else?" Thomas looks up from the table, eyes pale and steady. "He said time fattens some truths. He said a man should make sure he has the right knife before he cuts into one." What does that even mean? It means don't rush a harvest. Relief never lasts long when somebody wants your land. Within days, Hale's people come down the gravel in a black SUV polished enough to steal the sky. Victor Hale steps out in boots that have kissed only showroom floors. He takes off his sunglasses slow, like a drop hammer. He keeps his voice soft, because soft can bruise too. He compliments the view. He compliments the craftsmanship of the house, his hand pausing on the doorframe, just long enough to make a claim. "I respect tradition," he says, smiling, "but progress pays debts." "We pay ours," Michael says. "Not this one," Hale replies, just shy of kind. He leaves a thicker packet, maps with lines that slice the Miller fields like cake. A schedule, a number. He calls it generous. Then he notices the living room floor. He steps onto it. He bounces once, testing, and he tilts his head just slightly at the hollow note it sings back. Michael watches that tiny interest flash across Hale's eyes. Something inside Michael locks. After he's gone, the house creaks like it's listening to footsteps that aren't there anymore. Thomas rubs his thumb over the edge of the kitchen table. 2 more months, he whispers. To the day. What happens on the day? Michael asks. Thomas doesn't answer. He looks toward the living room like a man visiting a grave he hasn't admitted exists. Days fold. Michael dreams about water pooled under the floor. Old floodwater trapped like a memory. He dreams about a trunk. He dreams about bones. He wakes with the taste of iron on his tongue and an ache in his molars, like he's been biting down on a secret. He starts to notice other things. A slight rise in the boards, forming a rectangle almost too honest to deny. Scuff marks around its edges, old and deliberate. A single nail that is not like the others, brass, not steel, and etched with the faintest ridge like a knurl. He Googles hidden spaces under floorboards at 2 a.m. and finds nothing that feels like his grandfather. He asks Old Man Ruiz, a neighbor who fought 3 wars with a welding torch. Ruiz squints, spits, and says, "If a man tells you not to touch something for 50 years, it's because the thing he wants you to touch takes exactly 50 years to become what it is." What becomes in 50 years, Michael asks. Whiskey, Ruiz says. Trees, regret, and certain kinds of plans. The pressure builds. A certified letter. A visit from a county assessor who keeps saying, unavoidable. A local reporter leaves a voicemail wanting a human angle. That night the wind comes hard from the north and the house answers with a deep settling groan. The seam in the floor seems brighter by lamplight. As if oil had risen to its lip. Michael waits. The calendar advances 1 red square at a time. The date, The exact 50th anniversary of the promise. Lands like a hawk. Dawn breaks pearly. The air smells of rain still far away. Thomas is already dressed, hands shaking a little as he buttons his shirt. Today, he says. If you're gonna do it, you do it today. Do what exactly? Michael asks. But he knows. He's known since the mop snagged. Since Hale bounced his weight. Since the house breathed under his ear. They move the rug. They clear the coffee table. Lift it together. Michael kneels with a pry bar his grandfather gave him when he was 12. The tool fits his hand like a handshake. He sets it against that brass nail, breathes once and looks up at his father. Careful, Thomas says, eyes bright with something that might be fear or hope or both. If it fights you, pull slower. Michael levers. The brass nail feels stubborn and then, like it was waiting for exactly this minute, turns cooperative. It comes up with a sigh. Michael wedges the bar under the nearest board and rocks it. The board lifts clean, no splintering, as if it knew how to open. Beneath is darkness and the smell of resin and something else. Not rot, not damp, a metallic sweetness, faint as a coin in your mouth. He lifts the second board. The third. There is a cavity, a box built out of oak and lined with tar paper and oilcloth, sealed with care. The edges bear fingerprints and old varnish. There is a lid. On the lid, a carved date, 1975, and 2 words, hold fast. Michael's heart climbs into his throat. He slips the pry bar under the lid. It sticks and then lets go, slow and heavy like a vault door. The smell rises, old leather, gun oil, cedar, the breath of a time you can't buy back. And inside, in neat rolls and canvas sacks stamped with dates, are coins, not a handful, not a small stash. A patient sea of gold. Double eagles, Krugerrands, maple leaves, stacked with a veteran's neatness. Beside them, an envelope with Michael's name. The paper rasp is the loudest sound he's ever heard when he opens it. Michael, the letter begins in John Miller's blunt hand. If you are reading this, time has done its 2 best things. It has ripened, and it has hidden. When paper grows lighter than a promise, you hold metal. I saved the harvest the sky wouldn't give me. If you've kept faith, this will keep you. Pay no fool to tell you what it's worth. You already know what it cost. Michael sits back hard, the room tilting, the world taller than it was. Thomas covers his mouth and makes a sound that is mostly air. The house settles again. Content, almost smug. Outside, tires crunch on gravel. Conflict and discovery. What's found and who wants it, 1,300 words. Victor Hale walks in with a deputy and a court paper like a blade. He stops on the threshold of the living room and takes in the lifted boards, the square of dark, the glint. His smile changes temperature. Well, he says softly, isn't that interesting? The deputy mutters, uncomfortable. I'm only here to observe, not enforce. Hale doesn't look at him. He looks at the coins. Unreported valuables on a property under foreclosure can complicate lien priority, he says. You boys might have just moved from a debt problem to a legal one. Thomas stands. He's not tall anymore, but he's farm tall, with dignity that makes suits feel shiny. This is family property, he says. Hale's mouth does something that isn't a smile, and the family failed to pay the family's debt. Michael breathes through his nose. He picks up the letter with trembling fingers and folds it closed. You need to leave. Careful, Hale says mildly. We're past nice. The law is not sentimental. Assets are assets. Then we'll let the law decide, Michael says. His voice surprises him, flat, calm, like the air before Hale. Hale's gaze flicks to the hollow, to the pry bar, to the neat stacks inside the cavity. He takes out his phone and starts to take photos. Thomas steps between the phone and the hole with a slow, steady motion, and for a second Michael thinks of his grandfather standing in a storm with a lantern, choosing which rose to save. By afternoon, the town knows. News outruns truth the way wind outruns rain. Rumors bloom. The Millers found oil. The Millers found bones. The Millers found prohibition whiskey. The Millers found government property. Strangers park at the end of the drive and lean on their hoods, pretending to look at birds. A blogger with a drone tries to fly a camera through the living room window. Ruiz shows up with a shotgun and a thermos, parks on the porch, and says, I can't hear much since Korea, but I can still spot trouble. The coins bring experts the way blood brings flies. An appraiser with hands like piano players comes from the city. He handles each piece with reverence, calls numbers that make Michael's gut flip. Gold holds, the appraiser says. Inflation jogs, gold walks, but it never stops moving forward. He gives them a rough figure that feels unreal, then lowers his voice. You need counsel. They get counsel. A lawyer from 2 counties over who grew up throwing hay bales and went to law school on a scholarship that smelled like diesel. Her name is Emma Carver. She listens without interrupting, then reads the mortgage documents, the foreclosure notice, the letter, the dates. Her eyes sharpen at 1975. She asks to see the cavity. She crouches and inhales. Good seal, she says. He knew what he was doing. Does Hale get to take it? Michael asks. Emma smiles sideways. He can try. But a concealed pre-existing asset held in physical form, privately owned by the mortgagor's ancestor, not pledged as collateral, discovered on the promised date and tied to an express testamentary instruction? That, Mr. Miller, is a fight I like. Hale files an injunction. He claims the coins are fixtures, accretions, some legal word juggling that tries to turn treasure into part of the house and thus the bank's collateral. Emma files a counter. She cites cases with names that sound like River Ferries, Barnes, Whitmore, Carr. She invokes equity. She invokes intent. She invokes the simple, indelible fact that John Miller told his boy to wait 50 years. Because 50 years ago, he bought gold when paper felt thin, and he saved a farm by making time the 4th wall of a safe. Pressure mounts. Reporters call. Michael declines interviews. He spends nights reading his grandfather's letter again and again, finding new sentences like planks he hadn't noticed. When it is time, John wrote, you will hear the house let its breath out. Don't hurry. Don't be proud. Count twice. Pay what you owe like a man who's been in debt and knows what it costs the soul. Hale changes tactics. He sends a man with a regulation smile to negotiate. The offer: sign over a majority interest in the mineral rights, keep a sliver of the land, and Hale will assist with legal fees and facilitate coin liquidation at favorable terms. Emma laughs out loud. You want them to pay you for the privilege of keeping what's theirs. The negotiator's smile doesn't move. He leaves a business card like a small threat. The hearing lands on a Monday that smells like rain and courthouse dust. The judge has a cattleman's hands and a chess player's stare. Hale argues refined. Emma argues plain. She places John's letter on the evidence table with the respect you'd give a folded flag. She walks the judge through the dates, the promise, the concealment, the clear intent to provide for descendants at a defined interval. She points out that no line in the mortgage lists ancestral concealed gold. The courtroom is quiet enough to hear fabric creak. The judge rules narrowly but clearly. The coins are personal property held in private trust, revealed on maturation. They are not fixtures. They are not subject to seizure as collateral in the existing action. He orders an accounting, taxes, penalties where due, but the core is protected. Hale's jaw flexes once. He shakes Emma's hand coldly and leaves with his dogs. Climax: the house, the storm, the choice. 1,300 words. Victory in court isn't the end. It's one door opening on another hall. The coins still need selling, carefully. Scammers start to circle. The market whispers. Emma lines up reputable buyers in a secure vault. Michael can breathe again until he can't. Because Hale doesn't like losing in rooms he can't control. He prefers storms he makes himself. On the night the sale papers are due to be signed, a thunderhead blooms heavy in the west. The air tastes like tin. A transformer pops down the road. The farmhouse lights gutter and go out. Michael and Thomas move by flashlight, calm, practiced. Then the back door opens without a knock. It's not Hale. He wouldn't dirty his souls. It's 2 men who work for people like Hale, the kind who speak in code and use gloves. They smell like cologne and rain. One carries a crowbar. The other tries a smile that doesn't travel up to his eyes. We're here for the package, the not smiling man says, scanning the living room with quick, greedy movements. You don't want trouble. This is just a correction. Ruiz is asleep in his truck out front, hat over his face, a loaded age across his knees. He doesn't hear the back door. The storm swallows sound. Michael steps between the men and the floor. The crowbar man grins. He knows what a crowbar can do to a man's bones. Thomas stands behind Michael, one hand on his shoulder, a transfer of steadiness. You can walk out, the not smiling one says, or you can be carried. Your choice. Michael thinks of 50 years of mornings, 50 years of meals at this table, 50 years of a floor that kept a secret so well it became part of the house's structure. He feels something stand up inside him that hasn't stood in years. He speaks low. You're not taking my grandfather's plan. The crowbar swings, fast and ugly. Michael ducks late. It clips his shoulder and drives lightning into his arm. He staggers, hits the wall, tastes copper. The other man moves for the cavity. Thomas, old and thin as winter grass, steps into him with farmer momentum, the kind that doesn't look like much until it's arriving. They crash, topple a lamp. The room flares with flashlight beams and lightning through windows. A picture frame falls and the glass splinters like ice. The crowbar man lifts again, arcing toward Thomas now, and Michael sees his father framed against the open boards. Behind him the soft gleam of coins. Michael doesn't think. He drives his weight forward, shoulder first, tackling the man into the coffee table. Wood cracks. The crowbar skitters under the sofa. The not-smiling man lunges for the hole. Michael grabs the back of his jacket and yanks, pulling fabric, hearing seams scream. They slam into the mantel. The old clock jumps and lands with a dull thud. The room smells of ozone and sweat and old varnish. A sound splits the house that isn't thunder. Ruiz at the doorway, shotgun leveled, voice gravelly and clear. That's far enough. The men freeze for the smallest measurable unit of time, and that's enough. Michael, panting, blood in the corner of his mouth, steps between them and the floor again. Thomas straightens, chest heaving. The men calculate and find themselves in the wrong math. They bolt. Door, rain, gravel, tires spit. Ruiz lowers the shotgun slow, his hand shaking when the adrenaline lets go. Should have brought earplugs, he mutters. They call Emma. They call the sheriff. Statements, photos. A deputy collects the crowbar in an evidence bag. Ruiz pours coffee black enough to scald fear. By dawn, the storm has wrung itself empty. The world looks scrubbed. Edges sharp, honest. Michael signs the papers under a sky that means it. A portion of the coins moves to a vault. Another portion is consigned to sale. The first transfer hits the Miller account like a soft bell. Hale tries one more angle. A smear in the press about hoarders distorting local markets. It fizzles. Something about the way the town watched the Millers stand their ground at night in a storm, about the way Emma spoke like a fence post, straight and sunk deep, turns opinion into a wall Hale can't climb. He retreats to his other hunts. Résolution et conclusion. What the house kept. 700 words. The debt is paid. Every cent. Back taxes. Penalties. A new roof. A scholarship fund at the high school in John Miller's name for kids who can fix engines and read balance sheets. Thomas gets a ramp at the porch he swore he didn't need. Ruiz gets a new muffler he pretends to hate. The living room floor, its secret told, its duty done, is repaired with the same boards, fitted back so precisely you'd never know where the seam had been unless you knew how to listen. Michael walks the fields with a different spine. He knows now that his grandfather didn't just save coins. He saved the feeling of a future, packed in oilcloth, stored under feet, marinated in patience. He saved a farm in a language only time speaks fluently. They hold a small service under the oak where John liked to whittle. Emma comes, hat in hand. The appraiser sends a note. An extraordinary cash, more extraordinary restraint. The judge's clerk drops by with fresh sweet corn and a shy smile. The house breathes easy. It had been carrying a weight. Now it carries a story. As for Hale, he meets his ending the way men like him often do, not with handcuffs, not with headlines, but with a quiet closing of doors. A state audit opens, then widens, permits fray under gentle tugs. Investors drift. The county chooses a different path for its pipeline spur. Progress learns that progress also means knowing what not to pave. Destiny, or simply the patient arithmetic of consequences, takes its share. Michael reads his grandfather's letter again, final paragraph stained with thumb oil. If this money saves this place, John wrote, then remember, money is wood. It takes the shape of the house that holds it. Build the right rooms. They do. They keep the farm. They modernize what needs modernizing and leave old things alone when old is exactly what they're for. Morning smells like cut alfalfa and coffee and the clean promise of paid-up land. At night, the floor is quiet in a way that feels like gratitude, not secrecy. If this story moved you, if the slow turn of a good plan pleases you as much as it pleases me, stick around. There's another one waiting just past the hedgerow. A mystery tucked into a barn beam. A will that wrote itself in the rust on a pickup. A dog that wouldn't stop staring at the attic hatch. Tap to watch the next video and subscribe so you don't miss the moment when the ordinary room you're standing in becomes the vault you didn't know you were guarding.